Oh, we rise, we unite, from the mountains to the sea, warriors for the love. Good evening and welcome to Rainbow Warriors 101. Tonight, this evening, as we get started, as I always do, we start with prayer. And with that being said, I'm lighting some sage with some sweetgrass. And I was just blessed with some Cherokee tobacco. And for this day, and for Creator, and letting us see this day through, I put down tobacco with thanks and gratitude for this day. And with that being said, I ask that everyone here be blessed. They carry away something that they need, a particle that makes their life and their world better, so that they will become the difference for the next 7 generations to come. With that being said, thank you, Creator. Rainbow Warriors 101. I now work as a Rainbow Warrior First Nations globally, and I speak with people around the world literally weekly. Almost daily sometimes. And it has been quite a learning experience, and I have met some wonderful people around the world that's working really hard to make a difference and to be a change. And we are living in that time. We are the prophecies that the Hopi elders, the Hopi prophecy keepers, and that Ghost Wolf wrote about in his book, Through the Eyes of the Shaman and Last Cry. And I'm blessed that the grandmothers chose me to come in and be part of that and saw me as a chosen one. It bothered me at first because of my skin tone. I'm quite white. Not quite as white as I look, but Creator does have a sense of humor. Speaking with one of my redder-skinned chiefs, they said, we see you as a bridge of races and a bridge of nations. Found that interesting. But it wasn't till a few months later, after I spoke at Tanasi in the emergence of the Rainbow Warriors with the World Hereditary, that I found out why I was referred to as a bridge of nations. I knew that I was a descendant of Keoki. Keoki was called the daughter of the flame. Her mother, who died in England, was Pocahontas, the bridge of nations. And through the prophecy lines of the peace chief, I follow in their footsteps. And with that, it's an honor. And I appreciate all prayers that come my way, because Creator says we don't get more than we can handle, and some days I really wonder. So I've been blessed to have some really wonderful people along the way, and in that is Lance Beem. I met Lance in 2009, about the time I was becoming a peace chief. He flew into Phoenix and met me there. I was shooting with a lady with Unsolved Mysteries. Yeah, I shot some of that UFO stuff, so I got some wild stories to share about that. But Lance and I had a great conversation. He was dealing with things of his daughter's passing and experiences from there. And since then, we built a really great friendship. And it always interests me because he is concerned about the soil. He's concerned about cleanup and concerned about being the difference. And with that, that's my kind of people. Because I'm sick and tired of the poisons and everything else that's been put upon Mother Earth. And it is time for us to hold that line. And if we don't, who will? And for the next 7 generations to come, it's up to us or it won't happen. We are making a difference. Thousands of acres in Africa has now become farmland. Tribes are now becoming successful in building industry. White pine, res. Dr. Will is doing thousands of acres of remediation there, and quite a difference. And Lance, with his enzymes and soil remediation and things that he has been doing, is making a difference. And when you can get away from pesticides and your Roundup and all of those things. And by the way, California is spraying Roundup right now like crazy over the forest. What they claim is for infestations when they can be using safer things. And think about this: not only is humans suffering from this, but all living creatures here on Mother Earth that has to breathe that. Think about that. All living creatures, all the little four-leggeds, the winged creatures in the forest. And it's time that we all hold the line and that we fight and we be the ones that makes that difference. And with that being said, Brother Lance, I love you, brother. I am turning this over to you to give us our teachings for this evening.
This is what I chose to do. I was going through a lot of notes and stuff, and I felt like it was getting a little bit dry for everybody because it's bar graphs and it's me talking. But I do like a lot of the subject matter, and we're going to go through the macronutrients. My good friend Don Ford, who's here with us tonight, he's sitting in. He's helped me a little bit straighten this thing out. But he's what will be our expert on humics and fulvics. He spent a career working in agriculture for the last 30 plus years. He's also a minister and just a really good soul, a great friend. And so he'll be helping us out here in the next couple of weeks. He's sitting in on this one, and I thought it'd be good to introduce him here soon. But I just wanted to share with you my ideas kind of came around that let's make this a little more visual and a little bit more entertaining. So I picked up a series of YouTubes that I thought would be of interest to discuss basically about nitrogen, the different forms of nitrogen, and the reasons you might use a nitrate over a urea or some ammonic nitrogen, and what are the consequences and what are the benefits. And then we'll get into phosphorus and potassium and calcium and what else? Zinc next week. And then, we'll chip away at these, but each one of them has such a great impact. And on the way, we'll be talking about worm castings and how these things are affected by, in other words, in fertilizing, and especially in agriculture and the macro sense with large farms, they can't afford just to use compost and manures and fish and things like that. But they can afford to keep the soil healthy by using the right forms of nitrogen and also loading up the soils with things like humics and fulvics that deliver much, much more efficiently, like synergist, these nutrients. When you get into the area of synthetic or metals, minerals, things like that, some of them are organic, some of them are not. And some will work together, but most don't work well with organic if it's very toxic. So you may have certain high rates of a material like sulfur that could be hard on the microbial organisms. However, if you use a rotation, that's really where the benefit comes in. We're not always going to be able to get rid of certain things that are minerals that maybe impede for a little while earthworms or insects that break things down into usable forms. So we'll just go through this. Nematodes, is another example. But this first one, we'll watch this person and talk about nitrogen and how to understand the NPKs and the form.
For a fertilizer to actually benefit your plants, it has to be present in the soil, and the roots have to actually be able to absorb it. Most gardeners only focus on fertilizers, the NPK numbers, without thinking about nutrient availability and nutrient uptake. So today, I'm breaking it all down. We're going to talk about how fertilizers work, how to read a fertilizer label, how to compare synthetic and organic options, and then I'm going to use my real soil test to walk through a real example of how to choose the appropriate fertilizer for your garden. And if you want all of this information neatly organized in a way that you can refer back to it, download my free fertilizer reference guide in the link in the description box below. Let's get into it. Trying to choose a fertilizer can feel really overwhelming, and it's easy to see why. When I go to the store and I look at the vegetable blends for fertilizer, I see an all-purpose vegetable blend that has NPK numbers of 444, for example. And then right next to it, I'll see a tomato and vegetable fertilizer that says 463. And then right next to that, I'll see a tomato, vegetable, and herb one that says 364. There doesn't seem to be a magic ratio. And to make it even more complicated, if your garden is like mine and has a whole lot of different crops all mixed together, like your onions and your tomatoes and your herbs and your squashes, it's not easy to understand which ratio you need. The truth is, most of us end up grabbing whatever fertilizer seems rational at the time. And although the numbers on the package are very important, they don't tell the whole story. But let's get started by talking about how to read a fertilizer label, and then we'll start talking about how to choose which numbers you need. This box tells you the guaranteed analysis. It tells you the exact nutrients the manufacturer is legally guaranteeing. It will always show the percentage by weight of primary macronutrients, and those are your NPK numbers, nitrogen for leafy growth, phosphorus for roots and flowers, and potassium for stress resistance and fruit quality. And nitrogen is sometimes broken into WSN, water-soluble nitrogen, is much faster to release than water-insoluble nitrogen, WIN, which requires microbes to break it down first. The secondary macronutrients are only listed if they're guaranteed, and those include calcium, magnesium, and sulfur. Then you have micronutrients, which are only listed if the company adds them. Those are iron, manganese, zinc, copper, boron, and molybdenum. If micronutrients aren't listed, it doesn't mean they aren't present. It just means the company cannot guarantee the amount. So now that we understand how to read a fertilizer label, let's talk about the difference between organic and synthetic fertilizers. I actually thought I had only been using organic fertilizers in my garden, and then I realized my favorite one, the Fox Farm Grow Big, is not organic. So there you have it. So organic fertilizers are generally in a more complex form. Take crab meal or neem seed meal, for example. They need microbes in the soil to break down those organic compounds, and then the nutrients turn into a plant available form. So because they're organic matter and they actually feed the microbes, in a sense, organic fertilizers feed your soil and then the plants. They're harder to over-apply, and they're generally a slower release because of all that microbial interaction that's needed. Synthetic fertilizers, on the other hand, are already in a plant-available form. That means when we use a synthetic fertilizer, we're feeding the plants directly and not feeding the microbes in the soil. Now, it's not that they're really going to do any harm to the microbes in your soil unless you over-apply them, but just know that they're not necessarily helping the microbes in your soil. The synthetic fertilizers tend to be highly soluble. In general, they're faster to release, especially a liquid one. So a really common and successful fertilizer approach in a home garden could be using both organic fertilizers and synthetic fertilizers. Adding the organic fertilizers is going to help you build the nutrient-dense soil in the long run, but in the short term, it really helps to have some fast results from synthetic fertilizers. Now let's talk about micronutrients. These are absolutely required for plant health, but in much smaller doses. Even though they're required in much smaller amounts than a macronutrient, they can have huge impacts on plant health. Micronutrients are essential for things like chlorophyll formation, enzyme activity, pollen formation, fruit quality, and overall stress resistance. And micronutrient deficiencies are very common in raised beds for a few reasons. First, the materials we typically fill our raised beds with are very low in micronutrients. So our compost, our bagged raised bed soils, our perlite, our cocoa coir, and peat moss, they're all very low in micronutrients. So our starting amount of micronutrients is very low. The second is what we just talked about on the fertilizer labels. Because companies can't guarantee the micronutrient amount, it's typically not even listed on organic fertilizer labels. So even though you may have a nice schedule with fertilizing, you might not be adding enough of your micronutrients like iron or boron. And the third reason that it's very common for raised beds to be deficient in micronutrients is because of all the watering and all the rain that may leach away those micronutrients. Before we get into looking at my soil test, let's talk about that one last thing I haven't talked about, which is how you get your plant roots to uptake those nutrients. Nutrient uptake depends primarily on three things. The first one, nutrients must be in a plant available form. So organic fertilizers need that microbial breakdown. Synthetic fertilizers are generally instantly available, but availability also depends on soil chemistry. So your pH matters, your mineral interactions matter, and your organic matter matters. Second, your plant roots must be healthy and able to reach those nutrients. So that means no compacted soil, no waterlogged soil, and no damaged roots to limit the uptake. And the third one is something that we don't hear too much about unless you dig down some rabbit holes on the internet like I did. The third one is you must have no nutrient antagonism. So what that means is that too much of one nutrient may block the uptake of another. Some examples are when you have too much calcium or too much magnesium, it can block the uptake of potassium, zinc, iron, and manganese. And if you have too much phosphorus in your soil, it can block the uptake of iron, zinc, manganese, and copper. And this is going to lead us directly into my soil test results, which totally shocked me. So I ordered a soil test from Amazon called My Soil, and I did one for each of my long raised beds in my backyard. They both showed generally the same results, so I'm just going to walk you through one. And it's really a lot of information, so it takes a minute to digest some of it. You can see right off the bat, I have really low nitrogen and really low potassium. I also have really high phosphorus and really high calcium and really high magnesium. And then the rest of my micronutrients are very, very low. But on the positive side, my pH is right in the normal range at 6.7. And the more I learned about these results, the more I realized that this is actually a very common result to have in a raised bed home garden. Over several seasons, I've been adding well-meaning amendments to my soil, like compost, crab meal, neem seed meal, azomite, and oyster shell flour. Nearly all of these are rich in calcium, magnesium, and phosphorus. There's a really good chance that the primary driver of the high phosphorus is the compost that I've been using. High amounts of compost, especially the compost I've been buying, which was bulk compost from a landscaping company, typically contains a high amount of composted manure, which generally is very high in phosphorus. I don't know about you, but when I look at compost bags, the vast majority of them don't have any.
It's a little solar house.
Compost is a soil amendment, not a fertilizer. So the companies are not legally required to have a guaranteed analysis on the bag. So you could be adding nutrients to your soil without having any clue that you're adding too many nutrients. And so I was pretty blindsided by finding out that my compost is probably the main source of my high phosphorus. I emailed them and called them to try to get the analysis of their compost to confirm, but they haven't responded yet. So the compost I've been using for a couple of years, combined with the fertilizers I've been using and the mineral amendments I've been using, have built up the phosphorus levels, the calcium, and the magnesium levels to really high levels that the plants can't even use. What's really interesting if you dive deeper into my results is that the low potassium combined with the low micronutrients and the combination of high phosphorus, calcium, and magnesium actually indicates a big red flag. This is blocked nutrient availability or nutrient antagonism. Remember what I said earlier about calcium and magnesium can block the uptake of potassium, zinc, iron, and manganese. And phosphorus blocks the uptake of iron, zinc, copper, and manganese. And what are the micronutrients that are low in my soil? Zinc, copper, iron, boron, and manganese. So my soil test is showing clear nutrient antagonism. So what am I supposed to do about this problem in my garden? I think this makes sense for what I've been seeing in my garden. My tomatoes are not really doing that well. In fact, the other morning I was sitting outside with my husband drinking some coffee, and I was just Googling one symptom after another, trying to figure out what was going on in my tomato plants. And I think really the answer is probably a lot of different micronutrient deficiencies happening at the same time. So trying to figure out the right fertilizer for you is not going to be a straightforward answer. It's going to require some searching around and figuring out which product is best for you. For me, I'm seeking a fertilizer that's nitrogen, but does not have phosphorus or calcium or magnesium. To me, that's feather meal, although feather meal is slower to release in the soil. So for more immediate uptake, I'm going to go with a liquid fish emulsion. It still has a small amount of phosphorus, but I don't think it's going to be so much that it impacts anything. Now, my potassium is also low, so I had to find a potassium source that doesn't add phosphorus or calcium or magnesium. So I'm going to go with sulfate of potash, which adds potassium and sulfur to the garden. But what do I do about the micronutrients? It's going to take some shopping around to figure out which product is right for your micronutrient deficiency. But the one product that I found that has all of the micronutrients that I need and nothing more was a product called BioAg TM7, which contains some organic matter called humic acid and plant available micronutrients. Without getting too sciencey, the humic acid attracts those micronutrients and then it migrates closer to plant roots. And the plant roots have a stronger pull on those micronutrients and can pull it away from the humic acid. So the humic acid helps make them more plant available. Equally as important as adding nitrogen, potassium, and micronutrients to my soil is to stop adding phosphorus, calcium, and magnesium. So what I'm going to do is stop using that compost I've been using for about 2 years. And in the meantime, when I'm adding organic matter, I need to be seeking some plant-based compost, like leaf compost or some straw. I'll probably just use the straw that I already use as mulch and just let it decompose into the soil. And then I need to stop using crab meal, which is kind of sad because of my root knot nematode problem. But crab meal adds so much calcium, I just can't add it back into the soil anymore. I'm going to have to do a cover crop or a nematode control product like the Monterey nematode control instead. So those are the results and my plan for my garden, which tends to be a really common result, so it may actually help you directly. In the event it does not, I highly recommend that you go forward with doing a soil test just to get an idea of where your nutrients are in your soil. I really had no idea that the phosphorus was high in my soil, and the only way I found out was by doing that soil test. If you'd like to do the exact same soil test I did, I'll put a link in the description box to my Amazon storefront, and I'll have a collection of all the fertilizers I've mentioned, and micronutrient supplements, and the soil test itself. It was really easy to do. I gathered some samples out of the soil, I mixed them up, and then I took a small portion and put it into a container they provided, put it into a box they provided, and shipped it out. And I got my results in about 8 days. Definitely do a soil test to find out what does your soil have too much and too little of. If this video helped you understand fertilizer in a whole new way like it did for me, be sure to get your free download at the link in the description box below. I hope you enjoyed this video, guys. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button too to get more content from me.
As I told you, Don has his expertise in a number of areas that overlap, but for sure, humic and fulvics, as she mentioned, fulvic is a smaller liquid form, more concentrated than humic, but a lot of it comes out of humus piles, but they do things to concentrate it. One of the things I thought was interesting, she just mentioned on the nematodes, crab. So crab meal is great. It produces some enzymes that the nematodes, it dissolves them. And so that's something I worked on a lot. And the other one is that nematode product from Monterey is when we gave the talk about Desert King. That's the Kilaya product that I mentioned that comes from the trees out of Chile. So there's a whole network out here. You're all included in it and sharing information with each other. And we really, in the business Don and I have been in, with big ag chemical companies for years, that's all fluff to them. And it's all kind of pushed away. So much good information that we're trying to get out to everybody now because so much work has been done in this natural area with real honest tools, real science tools to measure, what these are doing. But you can see how complicated just looking at a bag of fertilizer and trying to understand, well, it has this that I need is nitrogen, or it has this that I need is potash or phosphorus or something, but you have these micronutrients in there. Well, I guess that's okay. Well, maybe it's not. Maybe that's not the kind of addition you need to do. So sometimes what I think is best, instead of going with like, this is a better product because it has more things in it, the NPK ratios are pretty critical depending on your soil type. And also, you might have better opportunity to get a bag of fertilizer that would be three components that are pretty interactive with each other: a sulfur, calcium, a little boron. Calcium and boron work well together, and so forth. So, we're going to get into these without. It's just too much, too quick, for me and for you all to really grasp all these different interactions of these micronutrients in different soils and different regions that you're in. But I think to focus on the macros right now, which would be the NPK primarily, and then we'll go after the more important, broader spectrum ones like boron and calcium and zinc. Don't forget water and carbon, and air and sun have a whole lot to do with how a plant grows as well. And we got to remember, like she was showing, she's putting a lot of manure in, but that tended to complicate it because it was eliminating some very critical things that, could have improved her. And think about a farmer, that's trying to farm organically or even conventionally. Okay, so I'm going to try and go back here and pick up this next one.
Bill watched your plants struggle. It's frustrating, right? Well, the secret to a thriving garden might not be in the bag of fertilizer, but happening invisibly, right under your feet. It's called the nitrogen cycle, and it's the master process that controls how essential nutrients move through your soil, the air, the water, and into your plants. In this video, we're going to break down the nitrogen cycle in simple terms, explain exactly why every gardener should care about it, and show you how to work with this natural system instead of fighting against it. Let's dig in. So, what is nitrogen anyway? You might be surprised to learn that nitrogen makes up about 78% of the very air we breathe. It's everywhere. But here's the catch. Plants can't just breathe it in and use it. In its atmospheric form, nitrogen gas is useless to them. For your plants to benefit, that nitrogen needs to be converted into usable compounds like ammonium and nitrates. And who are the tireless workers doing this conversion? Mostly, it's a massive, invisible army of microscopic organisms living in your soil. These tiny microbes are the real MVPs of your garden's nutrient supply chain. The whole process starts with a step called nitrogen fixation. This is the magic moment where nitrogen gas from the atmosphere gets fixed or captured and turned into ammonium. Certain amazing bacteria are the stars of this show. Some of them live freely in the soil, just doing their thing. Others have a special partnership with a group of plants we all know and love, legumes. Think peas, beans, clover, and vetch. These bacteria live in little bumps on the plant roots, called nodules, and they trade the ammonium they create for sugars from the plant. It's a perfect partnership. Even a lightning strike can fix a small amount of nitrogen in the air, delivering it to the soil with the rain. Nature is pretty incredible, isn't it? Next up is nitrification. Once we have ammonium in the soil, another group of bacteria gets to work, but only if the conditions are right. They need oxygen, so this step happens best in well-aerated, fluffy soil. These bacteria first convert the ammonium into something called nitrite, and then another group quickly converts that nitrite into nitrate. Now, nitrate is like a 5-star meal for your plants. It's super easy for them to absorb through their roots. But there's a downside. Nitrate is also very soluble in water. This means it can easily wash away with heavy rain or overwatering, a process called leaching. So, while it's great for plants, it can also be easily lost from your garden soil. This brings us to assimilation. This is the part we're all waiting for. As gardeners, it's when your plants finally get to feast. They absorb the ammonium and nitrates we've been talking about through their root systems. Once inside the plant, that nitrogen becomes the fundamental building block for all the important stuff. It's used to create lush green leaves, vital proteins, and the chlorophyll that makes photosynthesis possible. This is exactly why nitrogen deficiency is so easy to spot. If your plants have pale or yellowing leaves, especially the older ones at the bottom, they're probably starving for nitrogen. Now, what happens when a plant drops its leaves, or when an animal leaves behind some waste? That's where a modification or decomposition comes in. An army of decomposers like fungi and different kinds of bacteria jumps into action. They break down all that organic matter, whether it's a dead leaf, a kitchen scrap in your compost pile, or animal manure. As they break it down, they release the nitrogen locked inside back into the soil in the form of ammonium. This is exactly how composting works. By creating a compost pile, you're essentially managing your own little ammonification factory, recycling nutrients to feed your garden. This process makes the ammonium available for plants to use again, or to move on to the next step. Finally, we have denitrification. This is the last step that closes the loop of the entire cycle. It happens in soils that are waterlogged or heavily compacted, where there's very little oxygen. Here, a different set of bacteria takes over. They find the nitrates in the soil, and to get the oxygen they need, they break them apart. This process converts the nitrates back into nitrogen gas, which is then released into the atmosphere. While this completes the natural cycle for a gardener, it represents a loss of valuable nitrogen from the soil. That's why good drainage and avoiding soil compaction are so important. It keeps the nitrogen where your plants can use it. So, why should you, as a gardener, care about all this microbiology? Because understanding this cycle is a superpower. It helps you choose the right fertilizer for the right situation. It empowers you to plant nitrogen-fixing cover crops like clover to fertilize your soil for free. You'll make better compost because you understand you're just feeding the microbes. It helps you water wisely to prevent nutrient runoff and avoid overfeeding your plants, which can cause other problems. At the end of the day, it all comes down to this. Healthy soil biology means healthier, more resilient plants. The nitrogen cycle is truly nature's own fertilizer factory, working 24/7 in your garden. If you focus on working with it, by feeding your soil microbes with organic matter and encouraging plant diversity, your garden will absolutely reward you for it. For some of my favorite compost tools and soil testers that can help you manage this cycle, check out the pinned comment below.
Peas, beans, and clover are among the 18,000 species in the pea family. Most species in this family, including these three, are known as nitrogen fixers. They increase in the soil, which plants need to produce protein so they can grow, and chlorophyll so they can photosynthesize. One way to use this in the garden is to interplant nitrogen fixers with other plants that need a lot of nitrogen. Or you could plant a nitrogen fixing cover crop like clover for fertile soil next year. Okay, this can be useful, but doesn't nitrogen fertilizer do the same thing but more conveniently? Why bother with this nitrogen fixation thing? Understanding this requires us to understand how nitrogen fixation works, which in turn requires us to understand the broader nitrogen cycle. So let's start with the big picture. Nitrogen makes up 78% of the Earth's atmosphere by volume. But most of this nitrogen takes the form of two nitrogen atoms strongly bonded together, which isn't very reactive and is useless to plants. For it to become plant available, we need the help of bacteria. Various species of bacteria eat atmospheric nitrogen and poop out ammonium. This gets eaten by other kinds of bacteria, which poop out nitrite, which gets eaten by yet another kind of bacteria, which poops out nitrate. All of these forms of nitrogen are available for plants, especially nitrate, which is the easiest for plants to use. Plants can take this up directly if it is near their roots, but they most often rely on strands of fungi that attach to their roots and bring nutrients to them in exchange for the sugars and carbohydrates the plant roots exude. Dead plant material is also rich in nitrogen and gets brought down with the help of worms, whose poop is a delicacy among nitrifying bacteria. Some of the ways nitrogen exits the soil is when the crop is harvested when water carries it away, or when it becomes gaseous and returns to the atmosphere. Or if the soil lacks oxygen, different anaerobic bacteria grow, which convert nitrates back into atmospheric nitrogen. Notice that these things only happen with loose nitrogen in the soil, not with nitrogen inside organisms. Okay, so we know that the nitrogen cycle depends heavily on life in the soil. Without them, the plants would be quite sad. But you may have noticed, if the fixation process is done by bacteria, where do nitrogen-fixing plants fit into this? Believe it or not, nitrogen-fixing plants don't fix nitrogen. Rather, they create habitat for the bacteria that do. The roots of this clover plant have little nodules that house huge amounts of nitrogen-fixing bacteria. The ammonium that these bacteria create slowly releases into the soil for neighboring plants and microorganisms to use. When the plant dies, the bacteria disperse into the soil, resulting in an abundance of bacterial allies for future plants' nitrogen needs. You know how earlier I said that water can carry soil nitrogen away? This nitrogen ends up in rivers, which can disrupt the ecosystem by enabling algae to dominate. But remember, this only happens to loose nitrogen in the soil, and not to nitrogen embedded in organisms. And fertilizer adds pure nitrogen without the organisms. So when it rains, huge amounts of it run off and pollute the water. Loose nitrogen molecules are also much more prone to volatilization, releasing huge amounts of nitrous oxide, a potent greenhouse gas, into the atmosphere. But that's not all. Such quantities of pure nitrogen irritate earthworms, which end up dying or leaving. It disrupts the helpful fungus on plant roots and changes the soil pH, making it inhospitable to bacteria. In short, it kills the soil. When the nitrogen all gets used up or washes away, the organisms aren't there to help the plants get more. So now you have to add more fertilizer, which worsens the problem. And these organisms did much more than just supply nitrogen. The root fungi also brought up important minerals for the plants. And now that they're gone, mineral fertilizer must also be used. Instead of working with this self-sustaining web of organisms freely sharing nutrients, we have to spend more money to add loads of fertilizer to dead soil, poisoning the water and contributing to climate change. Considering the inability of dead soil to supply plants with nutrients, it's no wonder that throughout the last century, vegetables have been steadily declining in nutritional value. Healthy food requires healthy soil. So if the soil around you is rich and alive, try to keep it that way. But if, like most of us, the soil around you is dead or dying, nitrogen fixers can help to add a little more life so that someday our tiny allies under our feet will come back.
Well, I'm happy to say a few things while you're setting them up, Lance. One of the main things that you see in all of this is how there's so much life in the soil. And so the biology of a soil is really important, and the diversity of it is important. There's life cycles, like right early on, something will dominate, then something else will dominate, then something else will dominate, and all of them have a purpose and a plan. I would say, like you said earlier, Mel, with the fact that a creator began this process, and so you want to help follow him in developing healthy soil. So certainly compost can be important if you don't have that available. There's lots of humics out there in the world, and most of them have real value. I worked with humic acids for about 35 or 40 years and ended up actually using those with a main chemical fertilizer company, and that's nationwide. And at first there was such resistance, but what they found is that they could lower their fertilizer applications with the use of these types of products. So what does that do? That helps the overall health of the soil. And along with that, you get better growth and better root development. All of that contributes to soil health. So lots more I could say, but I assume, Lance, you're already back at it, and this is kind of passions for me. So anyway, I'll let you
No,
run.
I think I appreciate your comments. I know this to be true.
If I
One of
may,
the
that blends so together so beautifully, because as we was doing that and looking at the nutrients, and Eric had mentioned in the chat about not realizing that some things would block, but then when you look at the natural process, It's like the trees and how they communicate. And when one tree is dying, just like we saw in that video just now, it sends all its nutrients where? To all the other trees around it. It's that becoming of one, that oneness. And we can't be any healthier than the soil. Our plants can't be any healthier than the soil. And this information is wonderful. Go ahead, Brother Lance.
I'm probably going to leave it to discussions. There is one more in the PowerPoint that we'll have set up that people can go use. It's a little different because it's set up in LinkedIn, but you'll have access to it. But I think we have enough time left here, maybe for some questions and answers. But I would like to say a couple of things to go between the two of you guys. At least we're on the screen. You guys have got me booked in here saying the similar thing. I've been in the business of synthetic pesticides and synthetic chemicals for the first half of my life. It wasn't my choice in the sense that they brought all us young bucks in to try and teach the old teachers something new from the universities about organic, natural, and things like that. And it was rough because you're the young person. You're supposed to be trying to introduce this thing. They go, we'll never make money at it, but the public wants us to do it. So we're giving you a job. Show us the way. And it was a great opportunity. I think a lot of us in that period of time, I was getting out of college in the early 80s. And I firmly believe that, when we went through the war and mosquitoes were spreading malaria and yellow fever and everything else, and we came up with DDT, that was a great savior, right? But it had its side effects, and every pesticide since, its side effects, as you know, was getting into fatty tissue and being persistent in mother's milk and everything else. And so, we thought it was safe and it was deemed safe. So why not spread it and, use it and have it be persistent? Well, now we've turned around. The next generation that I came through, everything had to be really hot and fast and then disappear so that you wouldn't get it in your fatty tissue, so that you wouldn't get it in the plant. It had to disappear. So we came up with these really high potent pesticides that knocked everything dead, including the beneficials, but had clean food. But you had to spray them early, because if you sprayed them late, you'd run into the same problem. You start consuming the pesticides again. Then we got, oh my God, tell me the yard guy's coming now. I'm sorry, everybody. I got my neighbor next door, and the yard guy comes whenever he wants to. So I'm going to have to probably get off here. But just in short, we're in an era where everybody, hook or crook, has to come up with some safer methods of doing things. And fortunately, Don and I have been in the game almost 50 years, and 25 of that's been working on natural products to find the potency out of those things and how to apply them and how to use them so that we can replace some of these harder chemicals. We don't have the persistence. Maybe that's a good thing. We don't have the 100% kill. We have the 75 to 80% kill, and we let the beneficials come in and finish off the rest. We don't destroy the soil. The carbon out of these products, like humic, fulvic, like the desert plant extracts, all have carbon, and they put it in the soil, and that's what's churning over the different microbes that you saw that went through the process of nitrification, for example. So I think you'll find in the weeks coming that we're going to be able to show you how to apply more micronutrients that are much softer, much less leaching, much more efficient. A boron, a calcium, a zinc, all those things, they're a thimbleful compared to what you have to do with nitrate nitrogen or ammonic nitrogen to produce high, corn production. However, what we do find, he was talking about the legumes, the soybeans, the beans, the legumes, they all have these nodules that are able to convert things. So adding nitrogen doesn't help it. It actually kills the microbes. So we have to enhance those bean crops to their maximum by maximizing the plant hormones we put on them, the humic, fulvics, the borons, the calciums, all those kind of things. It's that game. But all in all, we are getting closer to being able to identify, not just at the end of the season or the beginning of the season, what the nutrient deficiencies are. And that's why I recommend that you first go out and take a soil sample and send it in like that gal showed. And then you can also take leaves off, and there are labs everywhere that you can find out how much is translocating up into that leaf. And that's really kind of the system that we have right now. We have little tools that we can clamp on and see if they're breathing well. We have little clamps that are showing us, different types of airflows and stuff, and that's good. We also have a system called bricks now, which we all know bricks from wine or beer or sugars, whatever, grapes. And now we can test in the phloem if all these nutrients are going up, they are showing a refraction of what the nutrients are, and it's increasing what we call bricks. It might not be sugar, but it might be some of those minerals. And now I work with guys that do that like every 2 weeks to make sure their bricks are high enough that it's got enough of the nutrients at the end that when it sets that fruit, everything is a go. Don, any more comments? Mel, can you get?
Well, I would just say that I totally agree with you, Lance. I'm going to be a contrarian a little bit, is that you always look at the overall picture. Sometimes an infestation is running through your garden that you can't stop with natural means. And so there is value with some of these products to curb that infestation and then go back to healthy so that it rebounds, so to speak. And the guys that watch, if you know your crops already, you can manage that. It's like if you had a bad infestation within your body, you have to sometimes take something to kill that bacteria so that you can get back to health again. So we're always about health, but there's a balance here that has to be taken. So anyway, I'll let it go with that, Lance. Hopefully, I can catch another one and talk more about humics sometime or something like that. So
I love hearing these technical terms. Now, Don, I got every kind of flower you can think of around my garden.
yeah.
Hanging baskets. Lance has seen all the photos, and my Hopi corn is beautiful. That stuff's now hitting 2 foot tall. I got tomatoes, and what really got me is I was started to transplant some of my plants from the pots to the ground, and I was amazed. I had some beautiful wigglers that I could go fishing with that was in the pots.
Yeah.
So everything that comes out of my kitchen in the morning, I don't care if it's a piece of egg, if it's bacon, if it's grits, if it's tomatoes, it all goes in the pot. And I got a separate thing for coffee grounds because I spread my coffee grounds around. And then I keep my little sprays with me too, because I want to be as natural as possible. And like you said, sometimes you got to do little things. So I get my Dove dish detergent with a little bit of vinegar.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
White vinegar and water. And if I see some little bugs around my leaves, I just mist a little bit on it, and it scares the crap out of them, and they gone. So as my flowers continue to grow, it's all making a difference. And this is what this is all about, is how to make our roots to the shoots be more nutritious, and we want the plants to be have more nutrition with them so that they're healthier. And that's the only way we're going to change and get rid of autism, the attention deficit, and all this other stuff that's going on. Is because we've gone so synthetic with our foods and food preservatives and all the canned goods and stuff That's what's happening to our children. Our ancestors didn't have these health issues. It wasn't until we started getting synthetic and started doing production and pushing production and really pushing chemicals. There is a time and place that you use those chemicals. But it's like Brother Don just said, you choose when a pest station is coming through, and then you want something that's going to be the least harmful as possible and neutralize the situation and be gone. So, Brother Lance.
Yeah, I think we'll talk a little later about the next week. We'll possibly finish up. We'll just go through some slides on the other nutrients. Obviously, we haven't talked about phosphorus or potassium. We have talked about calcium and boron, but I think we could do a pretty good job within an hour between Don and I. And I would like Don, then after that, we're finished. Now we're going to know what is, and you saw, with the test and things that, we didn't know we were doing things wrong. I mean, we've learned those the hard way ourselves, but what Don and I have learned with our tools that are natural, a lot of them, is that they're very effective at kind of regulating some of that toxicity. And the humic fulvic is one of those. The other is hydrogen peroxide works great. And people don't use that enough, especially in the garden, because you just add a little tablespoon into a liter of water, stir it up, and it oxygenates the plants. That's an old, I'd love to hear some of the native uh, things that are synchronicity to us, the things that they would do, just like the Amish. They have all these things that they've learned and shared and handed down, and us poor white boys, we just don't know what any of that is. We're more on the margarine side of butter, and we're more on the synthetic cocoa and all that kind of stuff. So I think I'd like to hear more of the things that your warriors are familiar with as well, and have some more discussions about maybe why they work and what else is synergistic with them. I watched one today, and I left it in there, but I didn't present it. It's boiling rice. And when you boil rice and then you pour off what's in the rice and you put it on the plants, on the roots, man, the microbes go like nuts. And, that's just it's pretty cheap. A handful of rice, put it in, boil it, and pour the water off, and it lights up those tomato plants for sure. Okay.
That's wonderful news. Now that you shared that one with me, I know what I'm going to do, because right now I think I'm up to about 9 or 10 different varieties of tomatoes.
Oh,
yeah.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
And this summer I'm planning on a lot of fried green tomatoes. So, all right, guys. Anybody in here got any questions?
Mel, I appreciate everybody listening, and I appreciate everybody kind of encouraging me to finally make the move of getting small packages on some of these natural products that I've been working on that usually are in bulk, like 2.5s and 5-gallon and pails and all that stuff. And so I have set up an arrangement with a couple of those companies to start getting pints and quarts and maybe even gallons of the products, and we'll have them available. And also, there's lots of other products out there that if people, Don and I are a resource because we interact an awful lot with the biostimulant folks. So, anything that's new or you guys have questions on, just feed them to us through the web, and we'll do a better job of responding.
Thank you, Brother Lance. All right, guys.
And did we want to, before we close the room, did we want to give your website one more time, or a way for people to reach you?
Yeah, my website is Lance at beemconsulting.com. So it's LANCE at BEEM consulting.com.
Okay, just figured it'd be good for us, for anyone who might not have heard before.
And Z, they're getting ready to set up, like you said, to set up the website, because There's so many of us out here that are not farmers but are gardeners, and we want to eat healthier. And when we can make things more natural and start doing this with our families, then we are breaking down that corporate thing, that corporate structure with thousands of acres of land and manipulation. So it's our time to take back. It is our time as Rainbow Warriors to claim our power and who we are, and we are the change that Creator makes in this world. And with that being said, I'm going to thank Lance and Brother Don and stop the recording, and we will just have a free-for-all discussion for a little while so that anybody and everybody can say hello and talk. So any closing thoughts, Brother Lance or Don?
Thank you guys for having me. I am going to have to leave. I didn't realize I thought this was just 1 hour, so I've got things scheduled out of that. So I appreciate that.
Thanks, Don, very much.
Thank you guys all. Appreciate it.
Oh, we rise, we unite, from the mountains to the sea, warriors for the love, you and me. We are the new tribe of the earth, connecting our spirits, remembering our worth. First Nation standing hand in hand.